Good afternoon, good morning, good evening for wherever it is that you are joining us today. My name is Josh Ferguson, and I am the Senior Manager of Content and Product Marketing here at Verusen, and I'll be your host today. Joining me today is Paul Noble, Founder and Chief Strategy Officer of Verusen, and Nick Griffin, Senior Product Manager for Verusen. Welcome, Paul and Nick. Thanks for joining today.
Glad to be here.
For today's session, we'll be covering a range of topics from lessons and trends that we're seeing in the MRO space, the impact and importance of adopting AI for MRO optimization, and the differences between traditional solution offerings and, say, purpose-built solutions for addressing MRO challenges. At the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A, so please feel free to add your questions and comments in the chat throughout the webinar, and we will address them as we get towards the end. So let's start off today about some of the trends that we've been, seeing here at Verusen in the MRO space. Right? So the main issue with MRO is, despite being an absolute critical function, continues to be stuck in the middle. And what do we mean by stuck in the middle? We mean stuck between procurement needing to reduce costs, control tailspin, and price variances, stuck in the middle from ops teams overstocking to ensure lines never go down off of their maintenance schedules, and stuck between suppliers needing better customer data, better demand signals, and a desire to gain more wallet share. Add in a slew of challenges associated with like M&A, free text PDOs, naming discrepancies, outdated systems, manual processes, and you find yourself with a very big challenge that needs to be addressed across the entire organization. So, Paul, what's been happening over the last year in the procurement operations space that makes orgs say, yep, we've got to make optimizing MRO our supply management strategy a big deal in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and thanks to everyone that took time out of their busy days to join us. It's MRO has been ever evolving. Obviously, supply chain's been technology has been evolving considerably over the last 3 to 5 years, and we took the opportunity to really highlight a lot of the things we're seeing through our customers and partner engagements, and wanted to share how MRO is evolving and why your MRO supply chain is really getting more front and center as a key part of its direct material counterparts and finished good counterparts as it relates to strategy. Now, procurement has always had the task of driving out costs and finding ways to renegotiate contracts, but has always had a challenge of, what demand and what needs do my operational partners have? But what we've seen overall is that procurement has become much, much more strategic in terms of their impact on working capital and risk versus strictly cost savings and purchase pricing and contracts and rebates. So with that said, operations and procurement are becoming significantly more aligned. And where the opportunity is that those two, rather than having misaligned incentives, can come together and be able to really drive execution, not only at a material and a plant level, but across business units, across a network of plants, and ultimately allow organizations to have a plan, a strategy, and be able to execute with one another internally, as well as their external supplier partners, a strategy that's sustainable across the board. And so, that's what we're seeing as this kind of next evolution, and why organizations are including MRO in global initiatives along with other parts of their supply chain.
Yeah, all right, Paul, but let's piggyback on that a little bit more. So why hasn't this been addressed in the past? Why is this something that we're now just looking into, or now becoming more of like a talking point for.
Yeah, I mean, you know, typically, and especially throughout the pandemic, we're starting to need to deal with some of the problems that were created then. You know, systems, processes, and the people that need to work together to execute these things across a global organization are in a different position now. So they didn't have things in place. It's always, you know, generally been take care of what I need, react to what happens. And typically, you know, what we're seeing now is to manage the risk that's been ever present, but really heightened over the last couple of years. We've seen that to deal with that risk, because it's really a risk issue, and where can I, you know, where can I inventory appropriately for what I need to use to make sure we maximize uptime? Who do I need to buy from? All of those have ballooned and grown, right? Inventories have grown so that organizations can feel that they have what they need where they need it. And then they had to get everything, every part from any supplier they could because of the uncertainty of supply. But operational risk really hasn't decreased. And this has thrown working capital and risk way out of balance. And now it's time to wrap our arms around it and really, really get it back to, you know, back to where it should be, and put in place, you know, some, you know, purpose-built strategies and solutions, and utilize technology to be able to bring systems together, be able to put in appropriate and scalable processes, as well as allow cross-functional stakeholders or internal customers to work together to be able to collaborate internally so they can better collaborate and go source and buy what they need to run their businesses.
Sure. Nick, now we're calling the session the year of the year of MRO, 2024, the year of MRO. So, I mean, what is it that you're seeing, you know, you're talking to customers, you know, that explains why we're saying these things and why we think 2024 and beyond is like a big stretch for MRO optimization?
Yeah, I think if you look historically for the last 10, 20, even 30 years, companies have been focused on optimizing their direct materials planning and have largely gotten a handle on that. And now are looking at MRO as their next supply chain initiative. You know, how, you know, all the things that Paul talked about. You know, how do we maximize uptime, minimize risk while also minimizing costs? And kind of the background to all of this is historically, unlike direct materials in MRO, teams and plants have been operating in decentralized ways. And as a part of these MRO optimization initiatives, many companies are looking to centralize their MRO process. And that takes the form of things like part sharing programs, allowing different plants to share materials, sourcing initiatives to consolidate spend, and, you know, uniform criticality, service level decision making that's made across the organization as a whole. You know, what has sat in the way of companies being able to tackle these challenges in the past is the data gaps that have been introduced by the fact that all of the plants have been running decentralized for so long. And, you know, we'll talk about this today, but, you know, with a lot of the technology that has arisen out of the last couple of years, you know, we see it as a very opportune time to start tackling some of these data challenges that traditionally, you know, MRO organizations haven't been able to tackle.
Exactly. All right. So you mentioned advancements in technology, right? And, you know, the technology that everybody's talking about is AI, and everybody's looking at ways like, how can I implement AI into my organization? What role is it going to play in our organization moving forward? Yeah. So what are you seeing across our customer base and the market as a whole?
Yeah, I think from a market perspective, I have to acknowledge that there was a paradigm shift that happened a couple of years ago, actually November 2022 to pinpoint it, where OpenAI made ChatGPT generally available.
Yeah.
This technology had been around for several years. There had been many people using it, but it wasn't really occupying the mind space of technology leaders and business leaders around the world. And what we've seen is that has happened as, someone can go and use ChatGPT for, let's say, planning a wedding or a vacation. Like it became generally available, and business leaders started saying, well, how can I apply this to my business? And we're seeing that across industries where companies are looking to use generative AI, not only in their front office and customer interaction, so their customer experience, the way their products work, but also in the back of the office, optimizing their operations. And they're not only looking at this technology as a transformative force, so moving something that might be done manual today to something that's digitally transformed or automated, but many leaders are looking at using this technology in a differentiating and innovative fashion, meaning how can I use this tech to differentiate myself from my competitors, whether it's making me more faster, more agile, or just having better customer experiences.
Absolutely. All right, so Paul, add on to that, right? How do we apply AI, this transformative technology, to the MRO space? It's not just front office, back office, right? How are we doing it within MRO specifically? Because that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, as we talk about, the future of supply chain is going to be, most of you on the call, or whether you're work for a manufacturer or an asset-intensive business, or you're a partner that supports it, you've looked at, what elements of data is blocking me, right? And the future of supply chain is going to be purpose-built solutions where you use ERP and EAM and procure to pay that are systems of transaction or systems of record. They need support, they need intelligence, and that intelligence will be purpose-built, AI native, which means like AI is front and center in how things are done and how things are executed, to be able to make recommendations to experts that can consume that information and understand more of an opportunity of specifically, what do I need to carry, and actually trust the data, right? So it's, there's a data component to it. The other aspect of it is, the speed in which that happens. Anyone that has embarked on a transformation anywhere across supply chain, but specifically for MRO, it's always project-based. It's always, chasing perfect data, and it's always led with a significant lift of data cleansing and categorizing data and getting data perfect, because most software solutions are, the prerequisite is data dependencies and garbage in, garbage out. So, what we've been doing, and, we'll lead into something that's been a lot of fun, but really breaks the ice, is, everyone out there, take some time, bow your heads, and, take a moment of silence. And as we look into what's been going on and what you've traditionally experienced, take a new look that AI is opening wildly new approaches to how you can drive the outcomes that matter to you. So data is no longer a prerequisite. Models have been trained to be able to read dirty and incomplete data and understand what parts are categorized ineffectively, and what that means for an inventory recommendation or a purchasing recommendation or a risk recommendation. It is, we no longer need separate solutions for every persona that works on MRO, whether it's storeroom operations, engineering, or procurement. All of these people work together. The system needs to reflect that. And so, what we've done at Verusen, but also what you'll see across many parts of the supply chain, is a single experience that everyone can work together and be able to consume this information without chasing or going on gut feel for what satisfies them personally. So you can get what you need at a material and a plant level, but you also can satisfy more of that visibility and centralization that Nick talked about earlier for organizations to be able to say, how do we meet those needs, but satisfy the goals of the organization to be capitally efficient and manage risk and produce product? So, you know, those are significant elements of, you know, where we are working with end users and suppliers to connect the two. And one key thing I want to hit on before we move on is inventory optimization is, you know, typically understood as inventory reduction. And so that makes operation folks like really risk averse on taking a recommendation from their procurement counterparts. So procurement has always found ways to buy better, but you can't always execute that buying strategy without really having, you know, everyone on board together. And so as we look ahead, really inventory optimization is a great way to go to get the operational engineering and reliability folks that are charged with asset uptime to be able to establish demand and say, this is what I am comfortable with. So it's not inventory reduction, it is inventory optimization, surely economic and operational efficiencies, but we're establishing demand so we can use that demand to buy the right things from the right partners and control things like tail spend and all the things that have happened over the last couple of years that really are challenging organizations from a capital and risk perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make a really good point there too, right? We have to shed that thinking of like, you know, optimizing inventory means reducing inventory. That's not necessarily the case. But, and
there will be a lot of reduction just because over time to manage risk, we've ballooned things and found ways to shadow account and we run into a lot of obsolescence and excess and overmax, but we can right size that. And it doesn't mean just like, hey, let's cut this by 10%. It means let's look at things and see where do we really need to be. It could be much more than that. It could be less than that, but let's find that balance that we can agree upon and be able to let our suppliers know what your demand is. It's going to be mutually beneficial for both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nick, what would you add to that other than Paul is clearly going to, you know, make all of our project-based counterparts a little bit angry with these statements?
I do want to double down on the importance, or when you're thinking about selecting a technology that is going to use something like generative AI, you know, the importance of having that being purpose built for your use cases in industry. With this tech, there is a large risk of these models being too generalized if they are not applied in the right way. You know, so an example use case that I'd give, you know, that people in MRO would resonate with is because you've been running decentralized plants for so long and you're trying to consolidate, let's say, your spend or your procurement or sourcing initiatives. One of the problems that we see is, you know, each plant has their own way, or each ERP has their own way of describing a supplier or a certain category of goods. You know, one of the solutions, or one thing that generative AI can address is normalizing that data. So telling you that two suppliers that are named differently are really the same, or two categories are really the same. And as you solve this problem, it opens up many doors toward either centralized planning or just better decentralized decision making. And you know, what would an application look like that is purpose built for the industry? One, you want to make sure that whatever that application is that it's harnessing user feedback and improving over time. You know, one of the biggest problems that we hear in MRO is a workforce that isn't being backfilled with the skills and knowledge that the current workforce has today. So you want to make sure that you're using and leveraging technology that is capturing the tacit knowledge that only boots on the ground may have, that the data by itself doesn't really tell the story. And you want to make sure that the data that's training the models is specific to your industry as well.
Yeah, I'll add one quick thing on there, Nick. Mostly, a lot of organizations have data science resources. They know how to build models, but even some of the largest organizations in the world, they don't have enough data to train the models with the specificity in the MRO space that they need to have the confidence. Any return from a model is based on confidence scores, and the confidence scores will remain lower unless you can feed it with enough data. So, that's where, 5 years ago, as we began developing the data portion of our solution to then develop the right outcomes that matter, we've trained our models with, over 20 million different looks at MRO data to be able to know that when you get a recommendation, it's already at a high confidence level that you can trust, because trust in data is the reason, we're in the predicament and the challenges that MROs traditionally had, but also giving trust to make that decision and trust in each other that you're satisfying each other's needs and obviously the needs of the organization.
No, I agree. And Nick, it sounds like what you were touching on there too, as well, is like you're giving the boots on the ground that know this information and have like this knowledge, decisioning right. So you're including them in the transformation. You're not just handing them a system and saying, hey, go use this, like they've probably been, experienced. Or
not only does it get their buy-in in the decision-making process, but you're capturing valuable information that would otherwise be lost if they were to leave your workforce.
Yeah, and being that it's the year of MRO, we have about, to make that impact and get going on these priorities initiatives that you have. If you think about, what we're not saying is that good data doesn't matter, right? Good data is always better. Where we've been able to flip it is no longer a prerequisite to get going on the outcomes that matter. It can be ran as a follow to starting an initiative for a business unit or a geography for your organization. You can get started without that 12 to 24 months of data prep that ultimately will become maintenance for you. So that's an important takeaway of how MRO is evolving and then the future of how this will be managed.
Yeah, and so to go further into some of the stuff that Nick's been talking about as far as the technology and the decisioning rights and stuff like that, I think a lot of people that still are not in our space and are particularly some of the people that are on the plant floor that have been asked to use this technology, they're hesitant to do so because they're like, is this going to replace me? We've already got these systems. Is it going to replace that system? Like, how would you alleviate some of these concerns if you're, talking to someone like that?
I think, having a user, you want to make sure that you have a user experience that speaks their language, and kind of going back to, it's not just the AI models and making sure that your AI models are industry specific or use case specific. You need to make sure that your user experience of the particular tool that you're using is speaking the language, of people in MRO, and is typically, why we've seen direct material applications that try to get applied in MRO and indirect fail, because those are top down, they're centralized first, and you really need to get the buy-in from not only the ops person, but have workflows that allow them to relay their concerns to the procurement folks as well.
And Paul, what about you? Like, how would you alleviate some of the replacement fears as well?
Yeah, it's it's an augmentation, right? It's a lift. It's what AI and we look to eliminate is, again, that mistrust in data, that reactivity to data that makes a person mistrust the outcome of what a software product is giving them. So with with that, it's going to free them up to do more strategic things for the organization. Labor remains an issue across asset-intensive businesses and skilled labor. So this will allow you to be presented with a recommendation and be able to make a decision without having to chase and do things, like phone calls and emails as often, where that knowledge is lost and you're losing a lot of the why that can go back into the system and make more accurate and more relevant and more sustainable solutions and progress for you. So this is not Skynet by any means. This is essentially being able to reach back to that data point historically and start becoming more predictive and more accurate, so that over time you don't have to go record by record, material by material all the time. You start seeing more of your activities and spend and reviews and inventory decisions being made for you, and it's gonna make everything more operationally efficient.
Yeah, I think this is a relevant time to introduce, a talking point that you and I think Nick were discussing the other day about, the Gartner Predicts piece that recently came out. And one of the things they were talking about is in a survey they had of like 500 executives. One of the things they wanted to point out was they were looking to adopt this type of technology, not because they want to replace labor, it's because they can't fill the labor that they need.
Yeah.
And so it's bridging the gap in labor that they've had for years, and they're just trying to bring themselves back up to that level.
Yeah, and it's there is this strong desire, where procurement has all of these internal customers, right? And they're there to serve customers just like any of our businesses are to serve our customers. And this will help them, where teams are more distributed and where organizations want to scale processes and activities. This allows you to look across EAM, ERP, procure to pay, aggregate that centrally, make a recommendation, make a decision, get it back to transact, and know that you're really driving what your incentive is as any given persona in that process.
Which, I mean, it's one thing to hear it from us, and, obviously we're the ones on the webinar, so you're only going to hear it from us today. But, we've seen this occurring within our customer base already. We're working with some of, the most notable brands on the planet. And, one of the things that we've seen is, we have one organization that's working, it's the procurement team that's kind of like driving this inventory optimization initiative that they have, and they've gotten their counterparts to buy in on the ops side by saying, hey, look, we can trust these models, we can trust this data, we need you to go in and look at these recommendations and put your stamp on it, right? And it's taking the emotion out of these parts, like I gotta have these parts, I'm scared this machine's gonna go down, whereas procurement's like, we can't keep buying these parts because we're getting initiatives from up high as well. So to your point, we have multiple customers we have to serve, and now that they've gotten comfortable with it and everyone is collaborating the way that they should, they're now starting to look at new forms of innovation. Like, all right, how can we push the envelope a little bit more within our system?
Yeah. I'll add to that just with a couple of examples of what we've seen, and it's been different maturations of an organization. We work with very mature organizations that have been working on this and established centers of excellence over the last 5 to 10 years, but again, didn't have the ability to scale these processes. Still a lot of manual effort and big teams. What we've been able to see, and this kind of goes back to earlier about like, is this going to replace jobs? No, but as teams are leaner in this space, what it's going to allow you to do is where you were, trying to use brute force and a lot of things outside of your systems and a group of 10 people, now you're able to achieve faster and more effectively with a team of 3 to 5, because you're getting what you need to make decisions and actually go execute upon them. There's a ton of analysis that happens that never, the rubber never meets the road because, people don't trust that data. People don't trust those recommendations. So whether it's, centralizing and then turning your individual plants into virtual networks, that capability is there now. And it saves a lot of time from having to physically centralize things and physically, go plant by plant by plant across an organization. We can wrap our arms now around entire organizations or entire business units and be able to satisfy, what operations and procurement needs and their counterparts to effectively, do their jobs, but also satisfy what finance wants and saying, hey, this investment is translating to execution and we'll put the stamp on it. And I think that's, a multitude of use cases from economic efficiencies to operational efficiencies to those that now have been using AI in this space for a couple of years and been using Verusen, that trusted enough to just say, yeah, anything under $1,000, just do it because we're good, right? Let's start pushing ourselves more effectively to not buy more and inventory more, but let's, really, really drive efficiency.
And Nick, you've been in the supply chain space for quite a while now. What would you add to Paul's points about people kind of having hesitancy based off their maturity level?
I think, it's always a journey, right? You want to find technology partners that, can paint a vision for you to be able to progressively, might be, let's pick for MRO, start with decentralized plants, but clean up the data at your decentralized plants, clean up the duplicates that you have at individual plants, reduce the inventory, but then eventually lead you into, okay, we're going to allow you to show, or we're going to allow you to simulate what a part sharing network would be, get buy-in from your stakeholders, and then incrementally roll that out into plants one at a time. You want to find technology that allows you to be able to progressively roll things out. And, we've been able to show that, that is very possible within MRO with Verusen.
Yeah, and one last thing on that point is everyone thinks of network or, hub and spoke and central stores, whatever the moniker is or the strategy there as simply the sharing and exchange physically of parts. I think where we are looking at it and, again, the future is, yes, being able to do that in emergent situations and be able to kind of like balancing things, but also establishing network demand that satisfies the needs of the individuals at the plant level. But, that demand fuels strategic purposing or purchasing and eliminates just the go-to of, hey, every 3 years we got to run an RFP. It's just the only way that we can right-size cost and do all these things. So it's going to open up tremendous opportunities for scale with the end users themselves, as well as their suppliers who can service more effectively, put in, point of use vending and VMI solutions and extend the network out. I think that's really where we're seeing the industry going and, where we're supporting our customers and partners to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've gotten a couple of questions that are coming in through, so let's take a minute to start addressing some of these. So, Nick, I'm going to kick this one to you. So it's great that, you're allowing our people to make, the decisions, but is this solution, does the Verusen solution feed changes into our system of record?
Yeah, so the way it works is, we're giving recommendation. We first would import data from ERPs or EAMs, serve recommendations to your users, whether to increase inventory to minimize risk or decrease inventory because you're overstocked, by looking at, you know, all the issues and purchase order history. Once a user accepts those recommendations, those are integrated back through to the ERPs, and there's various ways that we can do that with our customers. We're using RPA, and there's a couple other options that we have as well. But to answer your question, yes, we do integrate back to the ERPs and systems of record.
One quick thing on that too that I think is important, and we've seen as a change from traditional inventory optimization software or spend analytics that kind of go on like monthly or quarterly pulls of data. That's too stale these days, right? Like things are changing too quickly. And so, you know, our ideal setup is pull data weekly, keep it fresh, you know, make your decisions in that, you know, aggregated, centralized view, workflows to get the approvals done. And then from an RPA perspective, your organizations are using RPA across the organization. So there probably is an RPA of choice, which is robotic process automation, which allows you to get data back in where it's relevant, which is typically min-max, safety stock levels, and reorder points. So I just wanted to clarify that, how that's changed too. So it's not, again, data's not getting stale, and it's not this, you know, big lift every time you have to pull data.
Yeah. So this next question, Paul, actually would be good for you to address because it kind of follows up with that as well. So this sounds like something we could use, but should we wait until after our ERP upgrade before we see the benefits?
No. No, it's, you know, there's a lot. IT is burdened with a lot of different things. Our recommendation, and we, you know, we're able to meet you where you're at, right? So I'm on SAP ECC, that's, you know, an older version, but we have plans to go to S/4HANA, and we want to clean our data and get into the new system before we adopt, you know, a plug into that. The big thing that gets lost under that, you know, thought process is typically when you make that move, you lose all your historicals. Now, a big part of, you know, where you want to establish a baseline when, you know, driving MRO optimization is you do want to learn from the past, like 3-5 years worth. If you lose that and you're just starting with, all right, what are we doing now? You're going to delay how effectively you can implement and scale. So our suggestion is, even if you're going through that process, let's get your historical data from the system you're on now, or systems, get that in, train the models for your organization. And then as the switch flips to the new system, whether it's SAP, Oracle, or different EAM or procure to pay, you're ready with, you know, more accurate and more executable decisions then.
Nick, we got one that came in that's kind of also in line with this. It's well, you know, ERP implementations take a long time. How long would this one take to implement in conjunction with our ERP upgrade?
Yeah, we typically say once we've got the data, a first landing of data could be as quick, we've seen as quick as 30 days, where we've landed a customer and got customers in. You know, that can go, you know, 30 to 90 days depending on the scope of plants. And there's ways, you know, as I mentioned, to do it progressively. You can start small with a couple plants and increase over time. But, you know, we've done onboardings in as quickly as 30 days.
Yeah, and that's a key adjective to what it is, right? So everyone on the call that's gone through a painful software implementation, typically you have to buy the solution and then prep your data, hire a systems integrator to make it work, and then you can start using it. That takes a lot of time and a lot of lift and a lot of pain. So, you know, we are able to, again, meet you so that we can onboard you in the time frame that Nick has talked about, and we handle it through. So get your data out, work through our great onboarding team and customer success team that helps walk you through, so that when that's 30, 60, or 90 days hits, you're ready to go, you're trained, and you have our support as your partner.
Absolutely. All right, and so this last one I'm going to actually pitch to both of you, but Paul, I'm going to start with you, because both of you have talked on data being good enough and data gaps and whatnot. So this one is you say you don't need perfect data, but how do I know my data is good enough?
Well, let us tell you if your data is good enough, right? So we have we've seen some pretty gnarly stuff come in from our customers and prospects and partners. But in, I would say, 90 to 95% of the cases, their data is good enough, right? And it's good enough to start the process and get going. We have a pretty simple process early on, because we don't want to sell you software if your data is not good enough, and this is going to be a huge challenge, and create more baggage for why people don't want to implement software in the space. So we want to get data early, get eyes on it, see what that'll look like, give you a plan, and give you an analysis with your data, so you have a business case that you can circulate around. We call it the Verusen MRO health check, and it's been very effective for removing some of those challenges, or being overwhelmed with, is my data good enough, and we have to wait, or we need to do a data cleanse beforehand.
Yeah, and to add to what Paul said, not only, just to clarify, this doesn't require a subscription. We do this working with you before to validate not only, hey, do I have good enough data, but also project the value that you can get out of Verusen as well, and what that looks like over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add to that. I think that it's what we're trying to say is the health check is actually a good way for us to kind of see where you're at on your journey, and actually determine if an opportunity exists for both sides, right? Because we don't want to get into this situation where we have to stand something up and then we're like, oh, you know what, you're in that 5% that we actually can't help,
Sure. Great point.
So, all right, well, I guess that wraps up the Q&A section, because we're actually about out of time. So, we just want to reiterate, thank you everyone for joining today. I think this has been a pretty great session. We invite you to reach out to both Nick and Paul via LinkedIn. I think we have email addresses that come out after this. We will be sending a follow-up recording as well in your email within the next 24 hours. So keep a lookout. Feel free to share with all your colleagues. So we'll definitely be reaching out, following up, and we look forward to talking to you. And just, hey, 2024, the year of MRO. Let's do it.
That's right. Let's go. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks everyone.
Appreciate it.